Thank you for joining me on day 3 of Cosmetics Business Live. I'm Kat Towers, Head of Culture at creative agency Love, and I'm going to be spending the next 30 minutes talking all things anti-dupe culture and helping you to protect your brand's signature style. So I'll be available in the chat function for any questions you might have as we move through. But before we kick off, let me tell you a little bit about Love and my role as Head of Culture. So we're a Manchester-based creative agency, but we have clients all around the world. And we're very lucky in the sense that we work with brands across sport and luxury, spirits, ice cream, and of course, beauty. Now, you definitely can't pigeonhole us. We're over 65 people strong, and we work across a number of disciplines, including design, strategy, packaging, activations, retail, and immersive. So my role of Head of Culture is a hybrid of strategy and research and creative. So what I do is I scan the horizon for trends. So that's looking at the now, the near, and the future. So my role is also about understanding the zeitgeist, but crucially, how brands can tap into that. It's about staying in tune with consumers and culture and helping our clients find their place in the world. So what our clients say they love about us is that we see the things that they won't. We see the gaps, the trends, the blind spots and the white spaces. We see the ways in for brands, and often we see the ways out for brands. We see the things that are invisible to marketeers. So hopefully over the next 30 minutes, I'll help you see something you've not considered before when it comes to the world of beauty packaging. And we're going to land some of the bigger things you should be thinking about in terms of your brand and have a look at some habits of successful brands and see what learnings we can take away from here. So firstly, what's the backdrop? Well, it's been over a year since the pandemic hit our headlines, and we've seen our lives and parts of our culture reprogrammed completely. But within this, we're seeing beauty thrive. So whilst lipstick and foundation sales have been down 70%, understandably, we've seen skincare and at-home beauty skyrocket. And we've coined new terminology, things like masking, and we've innovated. We have new products like these blue light filtering products because of all of our increased screen time during lockdown. But beauty hasn't just been the focus of consumers. Beauty is the focus of the world. All eyes are on beauty. It's where all the interesting things are happening. And beauty has some of the most dedicated and vocal fandoms of all. And when I work with other clients, so non-beauty clients, we often look sideways when it comes to best-in-class examples of brands that are, kind of harnessing communities or, being first with design and trends and playing into culture. So what's important for us to remember is that beauty makes people feel good, and there's a really important role for beauty in people's lives. But today's theme is all about packaging. So if we zoom in, we know that packaging is a huge part of beauty culture. It's the exciting bit, and it's the bit that builds anticipation. And the rise of social media has created these new rules. It means that everything has to look great with beautiful design at the heart of it. Because we're talking to a design-first consumer. Beauty consumers are used to beautiful design in every other aspect of their lives, as you can see here. So it's gone from something that lived in the bottom corner of an advert, something that was considered some functional, is now very emotional. Packaging has gone from this protected vessel to really it's the jewel in the crown. And when it comes to beauty packaging, we photograph it. We film it. We love to show it off. We accessorize it. We repurpose it. We personalize it. And some people even resell it for a profit. So all of that sounds great and very exciting, but there are contradictions at play. Consumers are wanting more to unbox, more theatre, more pace, more new news. But on the other hand, they're demanding less waste. So that can make it very difficult as brand managers to navigate. So let's just take a step back and look at packaging in simpler times. So if we look back a decade, you know, packaging was driven by very different codes of status and design cues. It was the established brands that ruled. Established brands set the design conventions, as you can see here on this slide. But what we know about conventions is that it makes it really easy for brands to dupe. So look at this slide, you know, when you reduce the formula right down to a glass bottle with a black lid and this fine type, you're really making it easy for your brand to blend in, which is of course what we want foundation to do, but not our brand. And the landscape now is very different. So if we just take in this slide, you know, it really is a playground. It's a spectrum of colour and innovation and forms. And you can see here, establishment no longer rule. There's very much a lot of love for startup culture. And loyalty from consumers spread from high to low to sideways. You know, this pace and the landscape is ever changing. But in all this new news, we're starting to see some same. So I mentioned on the previous slide that it was a playground, and in any playground, you start to get groups. So if you zoom in to the last slide, you start to see some category orthodoxies and little pockets of homogenization at play. So an example of this, you know, when Aesop launched, they felt so unique to the scene, but as new brands borrow similar design language, it creates its own conventions, you know, its own subcategory. So now we have this apothecary bunch, which ladders across all access and price points. Or as we know, savvy consumers are increasingly, you know, shopping and navigating products by key ingredient. But from a design point of view, it's created this, what we call a blanding effect, where packaging is all about minimalism and reductiveness. You know, everything is simplified right down to just the ingredients on the bottle. But by doing so, you make it easy for brands to borrow this design language. And of course, we have the millennial gang, you know, the blushed pinks and the nudes, of which there are now hundreds. And it's a complex system of duping today. So traditionally, duping was built around established brands and this high-low model, very much like in fashion. So the examples here we have of Tom Ford and Primark, Charlotte Tilbury and Aldi. You know, now it's happening sideways in the category where design codes are being shared. So if you look at Fenty Beauty and KKW Beauty. So in all of this, what we need to understand is that dupe culture is part of beauty culture. There are hundreds of thousands of tags on social media and on YouTube, and it's big business. You know, some brands like Beauty Pie have built their whole businesses on duping. But while dupe culture is inevitable, there are ways to make it harder. And there are ways that we can protect your brand's signature style. So in this next section, we'll look at 3 ways to do that. Starting off with some strong key brand assets. You know, if you're looking to build a brand across your packaging, always start with your strong key brand assets and make them work really hard for you. So remember that your key brand assets are the building blocks of your signature style. And if you start with your logo and your word mark, these are actually the elements that you can protect and trademark from a legal point of view. But there's so much more than that. You know, they're a really important element, especially if you consider how your brand is reduced right down to a social avatar. That is all you see. Then think about application. You know, how does it look across your packaging? And then away from packaging into culture. And Glossier, a great example of a brand that really protected their logo and used it consistently across all touch points. Next, we can look at colour and form as a key brand asset. So owning a colour can help your brand stand out. So when the crowd's going pink, you could do what Pharrell and Human Race Skincare have done and go green. Or really consider your form. You know, do you have a distinct silhouette that you own? That can really help your brand stand out on a shelving. So we know that this is Chanel No. 5 just by looking at the key line. And it's very much up there with other iconic brand silhouettes such as Coca-Cola. But the thing to remember with key brand assets is that they're stronger when you use them together. So by this, I mean, you know, using them as a set, that's your logo, your word mark, your colour and a form, and build them over time. So it's that tight, consistent ownership of key brand assets built over time that will reinforce your signature style. You can also take the Dorset test. So do your key brand assets work really hard when they're reduced right down to a delivery box? Are they instantly recognizable? Because remember, this is how a lot of consumers will engage and see your brand nowadays. It's no longer just about how it looks on the shelf. Okay, so secondly, let's consider your brand's personality on pack, which is a lot harder to duplicate. So considering your tone of voice, this is what you say and how you say it on pack as part of your signature style. So if you're a new brand, really consider what your brand name is saying to the world. What are your consumers typing in, searching for, tagging and sharing with their friends? Drunk Elephant is a great example of a brand that's got tons of personality. Also think about your product naming. It's a great way to inject personality, and By Rodo are masters of naming. So things like Space Rage and Gypsy Water and Mixed Emotions. And if any of you know Gwyneth Paltrow's candles, she's a big fan of driving personality on pack. So if you know what I'm talking about with that reference, maybe drop me a thumbs up in the chat. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then maybe Google that as a follow-up. Okay, and limited editions are a great way to leverage your tone of voice, like this iconic Tom Ford fragrance. You can also stand apart from the crowd and drive personality through your packaging rituals. So think about the way you interact with a product, how it twists and stands up, how it stacks together. And Fenty Beauty are a great example of this, with their very tactile, magnetic packaging that snaps together. And it's got this angular, beveled edges that stop it from rolling off the table, which is a great insight. Or like Dr. Jart's very recent AR packaging, really think about how your rituals come to life. And does your packaging have scroll-stopping personality? Is it designed for Instagram and TikTok? When we work with beauty brands, we often consider what I call the scroll signs over the shelf signs, because that's where a lot of the consideration, the double taps and the purchases are being made. And we know that great scroll-stopping packaging needs to have like a high dose of personality. And you'll start to notice the brands that are really kind of peeling apart from the crowd are the ones that up their bravery levels. Which brings me on to my next point about why notness. Consumers are well educated in visual culture, and they're used to brands switching it up and being bold and playful and without constraint, and they love it. The more surprising, the better. So try not to question why so much, because consumers look at it and they just think it's brilliant. They think, well, why not? So the third signature style I want to talk about is your brand behavior. And you might be on very different journeys. Some of you might have more established brands, others might just be launching brands. But if you want to build something that stands the test of time and stands up to duping, you have to consider these invisible key brand assets, which is how your brand behaves. So this is what we're calling the fifth dimension of packaging. What is your brand's signature style beyond the way it looks? One way you can create a signature behavior is through collaboration. And we know that collaborations are an ingrained part of beauty culture. So collaborations are a great way for brands to build credibility and spark conversations with new audiences in new spaces. And they give you the platform to really up your artfulness, which we know is something that consumers are looking for. Or if you're in a bit of a lull, you can bring some excitement to your brand by playing into drop culture. And we spoke about why notness, but think about how collaborations can help you deliver this. So beauty consumers are looking for surprising, culturally in tune partnerships, not necessarily just luxury brand to luxury brand. So you must consider, are you set up for this through your packaging? Is it collaboration ready? And it's a kind of a test of how strong your key brand assets are. Can you give your packaging over to another brand and still be recognised? So we have the example here of Pat McGrath, and she's given her whole lipstick bullet over to Supreme's iconic red and their massive logo, but it is still undeniably Pat McGrath. And you can even flood her packaging with all the Star Wars characters under the sun. And it's a testament to how strong her signature style is. And another way to add a signature behaviour is to consider limited editions. So they're a great way to create hype and show your brand's point of view on the world. And we know that consumers are desperate for interesting, and they crave new news for their social feeds. So limited editions can be used to tell stories through your packaging. You can play into cultural moments. You can speak to new audiences. Or you can use limited editions just to have more fun. They're also a great way for established brands who might not be as nimble as startups to really leverage a key product for some excitement for the brand. So it's not about a complete brand overhaul or man-marking the startups. It's about tapping into new spaces with new energy through limited editions. And an example of this is we work with luxury Japanese skincare brand SK-II on their limited edition strategy. And it's something that they're known for now, and consumers really look forward to it. It's become part of their signature style. And it all revolves around one product, their iconic facial treatment essence, which we repackage as a limited edition. And if you start to drop these limited edition packs around seasonal or cultural moments, you start to, through packaging, create this behaviour, a signature style over time. And limited editions are a great way to stamp your point of view on the world. And it takes you from a brand that lives in people's cupboards and on their shelves to brands that live in social feeds and a brand that drives conversation. You know, it goes from packaging to pop-up and beyond. So next, let's consider how your brand intersects with culture. You know, where does your brand and your packaging show up beyond the beauty hall? Because remember that your brand might be everything to you, but to a consumer, it just makes up a small part of their wider cultural kind of universe. And remember that brands are switching from traditional marketing that would interrupt culture to the act of creating and enriching culture itself. So Glossier are a great example of a brand that lean into culture and have their products show up in new spaces. So whether that's creating conversations with new audiences, like their sponsorship of the women's NBA, or showing up in key cultural moments, so flooding the red carpets at the Oscars, for example, or really tapping into the zeitgeist. So they knew that hundreds of thousands of Glossier fans were going to be tuned into this live stream, and there they are in the background. And Glossier are great at really kind of sending up their fans and playing with their fandom. So whether that's through gamification or, you know, encouraging all these memes that are created about them, you know, they really harness this fan power. And to the fans, wearing that logo is a badge of honor. So all of these things are less about a big 360-degree campaign that we might have spoken about, you know, years ago. It's more about how your brand shows up 365 days a year. Because remember, actions speak louder than logos, and they certainly can't be duped as easily. So we talked a lot about leveraging your packaging as part of your brand signature style, but crucially, what I would say is that be ready for your packaging to disappear. So think about how you can protect your signature style beyond packaging. And we know it's an amazing tool. It lives in people's homes and on social feeds, but we can't hinge everything on that. Because we know in today's society, consumers are actively turning away from brands that aren't addressing the environmental issues that we're facing as consumers. And whilst they still want to buy goods, they're seeking products that, you know, tap into their belief systems. So how does your signature style live on without secondary or significantly minimized packaging? How else is your brand, you know, living and breathing? What else is your brand doing that can't be duped? So a recent example I can give you of this is from Julie Scott, the founder of Starface, and her new brand, which launched last week, called Plus. And that's a zero-waste, sustainable body wash sheet that's activated in water. But more interestingly, all of her packaging dissolves, just goes straight down the plug hole. So beyond packaging, beyond great design, Plus is owning a ritual and it's capturing that consumer mindset. So to own a signature style like Plus, you can't ignore the bigger cultural and social themes. You have to keep innovating. Because finally, innovation is the lifeblood of your brand. You don't assume your brand will be, relevant in 5 years' time, and don't corner yourself into where duping becomes a problem. And what I mean by that is, we've spoken about Glossier a fair bit today, but they're a great example because if they just relied on their great pink packaging, they would have been swallowed up in a sea of other brands that have great pink packaging. But it's their innovation and their dedication to their behaviours that's found them their place in the world. So I hope I've given you some actionable thoughts and shared some insights and examples that you might not have seen. And I'll just wrap up with these 5 key takeaways. So remember that dupe culture is inevitable, but we can make it harder. Go away from here and really consider your key brand assets. Are they strong? Are you using them in a consistent manner? And really think about building them over time. Think about your personality on pack, and where you can, try and up that bravery level. And then think about your behaviour. Are you investing enough into culture? And finally, keep moving and keep innovating. So thanks, guys. Hopefully I've been speaking to some of you in the chat, but if any of you want to follow up with me after this, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And of course, enjoy the rest of your sessions.